Good afternoon, everybody. Everyone feel refreshed? And you've gotten over that debate before we all went away, and now you've all had your fill of lunch and dessert, and you're ready to go. So I'm going to kick it off. We are going to talk to you this afternoon about tokenization. Not surprisingly, it's been the topic of the whole day. But what does it mean for an enterprise? My name is Clare Adelgren. I head up the go-to-market strategy and sales and operations for EY's blockchain business. And we build solutions for enterprises on the public blockchain. So full disclosure, I have a vested interest in hearing about this topic. And I have quite some opinions on it myself, of course. But I think to kick it off, I would love all of you. You've all got very different perspectives on this, I think. You're looking at it through different lenses. So if you can each introduce yourself. And my first question for you is really, is it true, actually? Tokenization is the new normal for an enterprise. Is it the case? Anthony, you start.
Great, thank you so much. I'm Anthony Bassili. I lead primarily, I lead our asset allocators and family office business for Coinbase Institutional, and then I also look after our tokenization strategy, which I'll define as how we as a firm are broadly working with enterprises and applications and networks to bring tokenized products to base and to utilize our infrastructure. Is it true that the new normal is tokenization for enterprises? I don't think that's the new normal. I would say that everyone is exploring it. There's some amazing developments. I was here in 2023, last year, kicking off the first RWA Summit with the Centrifuge team and everyone else here. And the room was packed, but there were no products on the shelf. And here we are a year later, and the room is packed again, and we have a couple $1 billion in a handful of products that are out there used by DeFi, used by enterprises, and so many amazing things that have been discussed that we'll talk more about.
James.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Wallis. I work with Ripple. I head up our work with global financial institutions. I've been at Ripple for 5 years. Before that, I worked in a lot of enterprise roles in the old traditional technology world. For those of you that don't know Ripple, we're an enterprise blockchain company. We have 3 main lines of business. We have a global payments network. We have an enterprise-grade custody for digital asset solution and a soon-to-be-launched stablecoin. Underpinning all of that is the public XRP ledger. That's enough of the advertisement. Now, onto the question. I don't think it's the new norm yet, but I think it will be. I think we're scratching the surface in terms of tokenization of assets and obviously tokenization of money, which you could argue is an asset. But I think we're seeing some momentum now. Around sort of work, that Franklin Templeton have been doing and BlackRock and many others. So, yes, but there's a long way to go to the promise of the multi-trillion dollars on chain that some people seem to be talking about.
Charles, what are you seeing?
What I'm saying, so I'm Charles from S&P Global. I'm a managing director in charge of digital asset, DeFi. I'm co-leading the team. There's been a real evolution if we take a step back and we look at last year or even the year before. You had the DeFi summer, then you had a lot of different use cases related to tokenization. Some were just uncollateralized lending and different type of protocol like that. But with FTX, most of those projects deflated and went down. And we had this bear market. But now what I'm saying is a revival of all of those projects. So it's true in the DeFi world and it's true with tokenization. We are seeing almost twice as many projects as we did every 4 months. Right? So we would be looking at different projects from a risk assessment perspective. And we maybe had 8 by the end of last year, and it's been doubling every 4 months. So there's way more interest with the tokenization and the risk around tokenization and the evaluation of that risk for people to be able to have an idea of the level it has, while before there was an absolute lack of interest in the field, which, well, we saw some of the result that it had.
Yeah, and what about the type of projects, though? I mean, an increase in volume of projects is one thing, but are you seeing any shift in what those projects are, what the outcomes are?
Yeah, so one of the things we did is launch a product related to stablecoins. So we've seen a lot of new stablecoins that don't exist yet. There's a lot of banks, especially in the Middle East and Europe, that want to issue stablecoins. So one bank wants to issue 7 stablecoins. There's a region that wants to issue a stablecoin. Then, of course, we saw the emergence of all the treasuries that are being tokenized, bonds that are being tokenized. But now we're seeing more and more projects, and they are all more serious and TradFi than they used to be. So there is CLOs on chain, there is MSR fund being tokenized. There are a lot of new type of TradFi product that are being tokenized that nobody would look at before, and they all have this interest on risk. Then there's one more thing that came more and more that just was not something that institution would look at in the past, and there are Bitcoin collateralized product that are also looking to have assessment around risk. So of course the ETF help, and now there's more and more that are actually trying to leverage Bitcoin as a collateral to create financial product.
Yeah. So many already there. Grace.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace. I'm a member of Citi's Markets Digital Assets team. So we are the team at Citi that drives digital asset initiatives for Citi's sales and trading business. And my remit spans everything from enterprise blockchain to tokenization to crypto, by which I mean cryptocurrency. In terms of the question, is tokenization the new normal? I would say definitely a ways off, though there's been a lot of work done. Almost every kind of financial asset you can think of has been tokenized in some experiment or POC or the other. As the studies would show, in 5 years, people are predicting maybe upwards of 15 to 20 trillion assets tokenized. You compare that against the traditional markets, just stocks and bonds alone is a 250 trillion market cap. So just by the numbers alone, we're a ways off.
I think that's fantastic. I have one question, actually, and I know several of you, if not all of you, actually, cross border and have a big, your companies are all operating everywhere. But is this momentum, is it really in all geographies? Does it look different?
I'll start. So we operate in 100 countries, Coinbase does, and that's across our retail and our institutional business.
Okay.
We offer different types of products for crypto across all those different geographies, and so that's custody, that's trading, that's staking, that's stable coins, that's lending, that's financing against crypto. So we have all this infrastructure that supports the crypto native crowd, both institutional and retail, in terms of how they want to engage in digital assets. And it's no secret that all of this tokenization conversation is going to run on that type of infrastructure. There's a debate on public or permission, but regardless, it's all blockchain infrastructure. So what looks different around the world is the type of investor or user in terms of how they want to use those rails and the assets on them, and the regulatory structure within those different jurisdictions. So in my seat, I look after what today is hundreds of different applications who are now each in their own way building a tokenization solution for some asset class in some jurisdiction around the world, trying to solve some problem within a opaque private market or within large institutional capital markets as well. So what that means from our vantage point is we're seeing kind of a slew of pipeline of different kinds of products that institutions who are going through their own regulatory structure, their own licensing in a particular geography, and having to bootstrap their own distribution process for both the asset that they're trying to tokenize and who they want to sell it to, but they're using the blockchain rails as the medium to list those. And so for us, we see everything from, we're seeing project finance, we're seeing climate-related assets, we're seeing private funds around the world, we're seeing tokenized reinsurance marketplaces that are popping up. It's something that I spearheaded in Bermuda in particular. It has to do with it being very focused on reinsurance, which is really great, and having a clear digital asset framework, which is important. So I think the answer is absolutely yes. It is different all around the world, but when you boil it all together, you're talking about creating financial products that you will end up, hopefully, depositing or adding to the market structure that's connected on blockchain rails, and then that gets utilized to create wealth management solutions and capital market solutions for us to continue doing what we do best, which is moving capital.
All of the above. No, no, seriously, we are seeing a lot of different initiatives across the different markets. I think the regulatory environment is obviously a factor, particularly when people want to start doing things that are a little bit more interesting, looking at secondary markets and so forth, rather than prime issuance. I think, though, the thing that's in common is some of these early projects have now, I think, got comfortable with a few things, right? One is, public ledgers are becoming, accepted by enterprise and institutions, because they have liquidity, they have global reach and so forth. And then also, I think the benefits, at least the collateral management and the operational cost benefits of some of these funds is actually very compelling. I mean, I know cost savings kind of a boring topic, but it actually makes a big difference. We heard this morning, I think, from Franklin Templeton on some huge increase in efficiency. So that piece is, I think, starting to get proven out. I mean, it's still very early days. I think the piece that's sort of people are still trying to grapple with is the demand side, right? Which is really, why would I, as an investor, go and invest in this particular fund versus something that's available in TradFi? What's the benefit? Because right now the interest rates are slightly less favorable on most of the DeFi protocols. So longish answer, but yeah, lots of activity, including last point I was talking to a couple of folks from Sao Paulo in Brazil, and they have a very innovative idea there that they're working on. So it's definitely pockets around, slightly different in each jurisdiction.
So I'm hearing that, yes, you can see this momentum across all geographies. It looks and feels a little different. One of the factors that you're both mentioning that's been an important factor is having that regulation in place, having those guardrails in place. But from an enterprise perspective, in the adoption of tokenization and that demand pull, what are you seeing there? Like, where is that momentum coming from?
With respect to regulation?
Yeah. Well, it could be regulation, or is there? I mean, that's my question. It's a
hindrance right now.
Yeah. I mean.
Yeah. So regulation-wise, the US have been behind. And we saw that Europe was working on MiCA. It's interesting when we look at, for instance, last year, everybody was scared about Europe being ahead and launching MiCA. At the end of the day, and opinions are my own, MiCA is extremely restrictive. Yeah. So we saw different jurisdictions looking at different way of regulating the field. Singapore is very advanced, but Switzerland is also very advanced. Now, when we speak of where the momentum is really coming from, I think it's something that I've been building for years. There are teams like mine and people like me in every enterprise institution that are being educating leaders and explaining why it matters. And I think AI was not mentioned yet, so every conference needs to mention something about AI. AI is very visual, right? The first time you show, I remember when I showed actual ChatGPT to our CEO, you get it very fast. You say, oh yeah, that's very relevant. The impact and everything that can be done with blockchain is not that easy to grasp immediately. So it's being built, and there's all this education done in every institution, I would say, around the world, because I just came back from Japan and I met people that have been pushing on their own institution. But again, it takes a lot of time. Then we had FTX, which complicated everything. But again, so FTX was a big news in the US, but in Asia, it was a few weeks thing, and then they went forward. So now speaking specifically of the momentum, I think it's really this build-up that was done, and creating product also take a lot of time. We saw that with what BlackRock did. And he always said, Robert Michnik, that the building up of this took several years. And the fact that BlackRock launched the ETF, I think, was one of the things that really enable the conversion of a lot of skeptics that, well, there's something to look at here, so they can actually open the door and see what can be done.
I would just add that it's a clear signal that you can get it done.
Yeah.
We're in spite of the regulatory structure, as long as you're not a GSIB, right? Some institutions might have a little bit more challenging time, but you can get it done, and there are thousands of companies that are getting it done. They're building on blockchains, they're launching their products, but what a regulatory gap looks like in the United States is that it pushes those participants offshore, right?
Yeah.
So they're issuing out of BVI, and they're going to other jurisdictions that may not be the common law standard, right? Or may not be where the vast majority of capital markets are structured, which then slows things down. But there's a lot of really good pockets. MiFID is going to be great. The TSS regime in Europe is going to be, unlocking pretty soon in terms of issuing licenses, and there's going to be a few players that are going to come in and try to build a secondary trading marketplace, for tokenized products. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, we are plunging ahead, even amidst, not perfect clarity on the regulatory front. It would definitely help to have answers to questions like, okay, let's be clear, how are digital assets classified? How should we report them? What's the capital treatment going to be? Are we going to get relief from SAB 121? How should we onboard digital assets clients? All these are, if there are answers to them, it would make our work easier. But that being said, we can still move forward. It just takes more time because we have to get
and I think it's a really good point. Is that I think that because of the education that's been going on, what I see in our clients is that there's a maturity of thinking now about, okay, where's the value for me? Where's the value for my enterprise? And because I know what that is now, when the regulation starts to come into place and when some of the questions get answered, you're more ready to move. So what I've noticed is that a lot of the conversations that we're having this year versus last year are no longer, oh, maybe we'll do a POC or test it. It's not as experimental. It's what do we have to do to get this in place? And so we're moving much more into what I would say are the traditional transformation of enterprise type conversations than have previously people have felt ready to do, which is hugely exciting, actually. We're just at the very beginning. In my view, I don't know that it is the new normal yet. I think that's in front of us. I think it's still, that chapter's still to be written, but we're getting ready for it. And I think that's what there
are a lot of institutions that we speak with that are building right now, but they are doing everything they're doing with what they can touch, which usually mean private chain. They cannot touch a token, so they cannot pay gas, so they cannot do a lot of different things. So you got really two type of conduct there. There's those that kind of build almost alone and prepare everything for when there will be regulation and they will be able to play the game. And then there are all those that are actually doing innovation in US dollar in Singapore because they cannot do it in the US.
Yeah, I think the days of the proof of concept are over, right? I mean, I think I'd say probably 90% of the projects that we're working with, they're either actually building something with the intent to go into full production, or they're doing what you said, which is, if they've got a somewhat restrictive environment, they are it's sort of a pilot type mode, so they're sort of planning for something that will come later. And that I think is a testament to where the business as a whole has got to, right? The technology is not the challenge; it's really the regulatory environment that's the challenge. And then, it's always when there's a new initiative, there's a technology and the regulation, but then of course you've got to have product market fit. What is the actual use case? What are the benefits? You get those three synced up, then we're in good shape. But right now, I think we're still very, very early, but real projects are starting to happen.
You still have to have a business case.
Exactly, correct.
It's very old-fashioned to say that, but you do still have to have a business case. I'm just wondering as well, the other topic from this morning that has come up quite a few times is stablecoins. What role do they have? Are they a pathway to? Are they always going to be with us? How important stable coins or even CBDCs in this whole evolution?
I'll have a crack at that if I may. So, stablecoins, CBDCs, they are functionally very similar. The main difference being the issuer and what rules the issuer sort of puts in place. So, I worked with CBDCs for 3 years. That's a very slow burn. So, stablecoins, I think, is where the game is right now, both for on and off ramps into crypto, but also in its own right as a settlement engine across different initiatives. So. I think there's a role to play. People are storing collateral on chain. Typically, there's there's some interest to earn, but that's not given out to the investor, as opposed to some of the other assets where there is a yield. So there's a definite distinction, I think, between the digital assets and funds versus the stable coins. I think for the foreseeable future, I think there will be complete coexistence.
Do you agree?
Yeah, I think when we talk about stablecoins, we should also talk about other forms of cash payments, such as tokenized deposits. And both of them kind of have proven that we can conduct cross-border payments a lot more efficiently, right? So obviously there are differences on the different technology. Even stablecoins themselves are different in how they're designed. One of these days we might get regulated stablecoins, and so that would be another breed. But yeah, their value proposition is proven.
I was going to say, we recently just announced with SAP and EY and PayPal and a few others, Google included, that cohort are now utilizing SAP, who has fully integrated the ability to handle stablecoins on behalf of their clients as an ERP system, the ability for those corporations to pay each other with stables. And it's a big step forward when we start thinking about the enterprise use case. And we talked about enterprises as corporations and their banks and their governments, right? They're large institutional players that have a lot of compliance to deal with. They want to make sure they're protecting their clients' assets and building their business the right way. So the fact that they're using stablecoins now is a really big deal. It's really exciting, and they're clearing that effectively through Coinbase, using our wallet infrastructure. And from our perspective, stablecoins are an amazing on-ramping tool to give people the infrastructure they need to start to engage in the tokenized assets, digital assets, Web3, period. I paid my contractor in USDC because I couldn't send more than $5,000 from my bank to him so he could pay his employees, right? Really simple use cases, and we're building those tools inside the Coinbase wallet to make it easier for people, consumers like myself, who want to solve a really simple use case like that, or cross-border payments where institutions need to send money around the world between corporations are a really big deal. And when you think about stablecoins, I think latest number is something like 17 trillion in total trading volume with that asset, right? It's
not insignificant.
It's not insignificant, and people aren't seeing it, but it's happening, right? So it's happening behind the scenes across institutions, a lot of crypto exchanges and other individuals. There's 600 million wallets today, people holding or engaging in crypto around the world. I think something like 20 million a month downloads for digital asset wallets are happening right now. So the onboarding process is happening where the market is largely getting educated, understanding how to use these products. And that's going to open the door for the next wave of institutional adoption.
And I think there's so much focus on individuals. And individuals, we collect wallets and we have different things for different things. But the news with SAP is quite fundamental, because what you're allowing there is the onboarding of institutions and enterprises. And there's a real need there. I often approach it at the other end. Our products are all about supply chain. But, you need to be able to deploy to the public blockchain. You need to pay gas fees. There's a real need out there to be able to onboard yourself as an enterprise, and it's not a straightforward process. And so I think it's the first step. If a stablecoin is a really good solution to help get you there to start with. I don't know that it's going to be the full story. I think there's probably more to come, but it's an important one, I think. most.
Just maybe one thing on stablecoin. It's not that institution related, but I touched on that as a stable summit that dedicated itself to that. As I've been living in Argentina for a very long time, and in Argentina, but not only, right? It's true in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, etc. People want dollars, and they want dollars to save because of inflation, because of the devaluation. And a few years back, getting access to stablecoin was not really a thing. Like before, like 2017, maybe 3% of the black market where you go would get access to stablecoin, and now it's more than half. And when you buy a car in Argentina, you do it in Buenos Aires, you do it in dollars. When you buy a house, you do it in cash, in dollars. But if you buy a chocolate, you'll do it in pesos, just because it's not that easy to transact in dollars. But and again, opinion on my own. But there's a lot of different use cases that are emerging in Kenya with payment in stablecoin directly. Well, then we got all those institutions like Mercado Libre and PayPal launching their stablecoin. But because those countries really want dollars, like the people, because they lost faith in their own currency, I think that there is a risk for some of those countries to actually lose their currency and have it replaced by dollars. So the stablecoin are a tool for mass domination of the US dollar.
That's it. And I think there are some that are not far away from it, let's say. So I think, though, without a doubt, we've got a lot of momentum. But you mentioned something a little bit earlier, because you said, but we still have a long way to go. In your view, what does that look like? What is some of that heavy lifting that still has to happen that you're not seeing? And I think each of you probably actually have a different view on that, for sure. Because your needs are probably slightly different, I would think. So maybe we'll start with you, Grace. I mean, what has to happen? What do we need more of?
What do we need in order to make it the new normal, right? I would say education. So I think that's pretty self-evident. Regulatory clarity, which we already talked about. And then I would say interoperability, right? We need to find some way. The whole point of tokenization, the benefit rests on being able to move assets more freely than we're able to under the current systems, right? So it's figuring out how do we either reduce the number of ledgers in the world. I think it's unlikely we'll reduce a single ledger, but maybe we can reduce it from the number that we have now. It's either that or we make the existing ledgers more interoperable, right? So that's a question. I think this morning we heard a lot of discussions surrounding public chains, right? And how, that being the focus, but I would also submit that we should be thinking about other private chain solutions, potentially shared ledger. So there's nuances between distributed ledger versus shared ledger. So all of that is, all that needs to be worked out in order for us to really make it the new normal.
Yeah, if I could just pick up on that. I agree with the interoperability point. I think it's something that's been talked about amongst the different blockchain protocols for a long time, and there's been some interesting projects, but I don't think anyone's really cracked the code yet, and I don't think it's the sort of initiative that will get any standards anytime soon, but eventually we need to get to that point. We are seeing, though, quite a few, what I would call hybrid solutions now, where core assets are issued on a public blockchain like XRPL, but then some of the regulatory rules are on a side chain or off chain, right? So there's a big sort of technology discussion around what should be on chain, what should be off chain, should it be on side chain or whatever. So that I think piece needs to get worked through. And then the other one is going back to what I alluded to earlier, which is at the end of the day, there's trillions of dollars of traditional assets on chain. What is the business case to move off chain to bring them onto chain, right? Is it the economics? Is it getting access to new customers, right? I think a couple of projects in the reinsurance space are looking to sort of lower the entry price into that market so they can get a broader set of investors rather than pure institutional investors. At the end of the day, that's the economics of what's going to drive this, right? The technology has to do its piece to enable that, and the regulators have to do their piece to enable it. Anyway, that's my view.
I think, for some reason, this should be a reinsurance panel. It's an interesting conversation, though, because if you go to Bermuda, they're the third largest hub for reinsurance markets. They have a long-standing market dominance for 50 years ago, 40 years ago, having established a regulatory framework for that industry, which was early and emerging. And then now they've captured that market. And then 2018 to 2017, they started to establish a really clear framework for digital assets. When you put those two things together, you have a deep-rooted industry with a lot of expertise, and you have a clear digital asset framework, you can do business.
Yep.
And so that's why we're seeing that particular really niche asset class that only pensions and a few other hedge funds play in, but $500 billion of premiums flow through every year, it's a topic because you're saying, hey, this is a product that is on a public permissionless blockchain, tokenizes the exposure, which is a contract for paying if a risk event happens, uses USDC, has the ability to use tokenized money funds. It's using Coinbase wallet, and they clear the USDC through us as their prime banking partner. And they could do plenty of other versions of that, and I think they will be, right? And it's just those pockets of institutional readiness are emerging.
Yep.
Right, they're emerging in the Middle East, under VARA, ADGM, right? We're tokenizing commercial paper very slowly under that regime. Yep. And you'll see it in the UK, you'll see it in Europe over the next 12, 18 months. Singapore we've talked about. But it's, it's happening. The question is like, how do you create markets around those assets and the market players that are doing it? And when you say like what's needed, a lot of it is trusted intermediaries, clear regulation, qualified custodians to be able to offer this in a really safe and compliant way. So that's the onboarding process that I think we're all doing collectively with our clients.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it's really you've got to have the demand, first of all. So these are solving real problems, basically. So there's got to be a problem statement there that needs to be solved. But on the supply side, when we talk about supply, it has to be a functioning supply side. It means it has to be not just technically ready, it's got to be operationally ready and supported with the right guardrails, and people have to be able to access it, right? It has to be accessible. So I think they're all incredibly important elements of what it is. I kind of want to go back though, because you did say that standards won't come did standards ever get delivered in the tech industry? I think standards are established. I don't know. I have to say I don't know that I completely.
I think we should ask the audience if they want to spend another 30 minutes talking about standards or not.
I don't know. I agree. Interoperability is important. But I also know that we've seen time and time again in the tech industry where protocols go and gravitate towards a standard. And the reason we do that is because it makes interoperability easier. And so I actually think you're going to see that. I think there's still many, many players out there. There's not room for everybody. We don't need them all. I think what we're going to start seeing is a sort of a more naturalized gravitation towards those protocols that serve us and serve the use case that we need, unfortunately. But that's the way that markets evolve. So, we didn't end up with a standard for Web 2 just because somebody decided it. That's not going to happen,
You're going to see some regulatory bodies lean in on standardization because they're going to need to. But to your point earlier about the ability to create interoperability between, what we call an app chain or a private chain that's used only for one business, and how those assets or the consumers in that asset can come and interact with a public chain, you need standards around that. So an example here is around price feeds and oracles, right? So today I think Chainlink is the largest oracle provider in the decentralized space, and they're doing a wonderful job of continuing to build out their business. And when we get past the tokenized treasury conversation for these funds that are tokenized, you're going to now need a fund administrator to be able to bring their price feeds of the underlying funds into the on-chain asset so the oracle can price it appropriately. Because if you go and lend against something that is variance relative to what it's actually worth, there's risk there. So standardizing, things like that are actually where a lot of the folks are talking about today.
Yep.
So I think the standards of how do we create a tokenized product aren't fully formed, but people get it. And the market's playing with a lot of versions of it. Now we're leaning into, okay, when the product is used, how do we standardize and reduce risk on some ancillary features there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the point about streaming prices on chain, actually, our group did just such a project on this last year, together with the Singapore Moss under the Project Guardian program. So the idea is to stream FX pricing on chain. We use the Avalanche subnet for that. But yeah, I mean,
we're almost out of time.
We have a lot to say, but we can talk offline about things like new global settlement infrastructures and the like.
We certainly can. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.